celebrating 20 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible.
This is Preston Farabow. Preston, welcome to Anything is Possible.
Oh, thank you.
Art. I believe art saves the world, personally. I mean, I've known that, but I've started to say that even more. What does art, let's just start there, what does art mean to you?
I believe art plays a huge role in our culture. I think that, what we know about past cultures, generally speaking, we know through the artwork that they left behind. I think it shows a perspective, but I also think that art gives opportunity for expression in manners that maybe are overlooked. I think that we're all born creative people, but sometimes through the process of education or church or growing up, that we kind of abandon those creative instincts, that we grow out of them.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I have so many different whimsical things in my studio, and I'm always transiting between my childhood and my adulthood, and I'm always going back over there to my childhood because it was a place of curiosity and freedom and expression.
Absolutely.
And I didn't have to have a skill set per se. I just had to have a will set, a desire to do something. And I'm thinking about, when we looked on the walls of the caves, there's art, right?
Yeah.
And when did you come to art, or when did art come to you? What was the first time you felt that spark of creativity and you thought, I got to do something?
I had an opportunity when I was in high school to take a stone carving class. And just, I don't know, through having that medium to work with and to be able to, it fit, I mean, it was I can't really identify an exact moment, but I do know when I was in college, I started out in, well, it was kind of a long journey. I started out in architecture and then product design and transitioned to pre-med. And I was continuing to take art classes throughout and had run out of my electives, but just kept taking the classes. And then finally I said, I want to be an artist. I'm going through these motions to go to med school just to make my parents happy. But my real instinct was to do something with my hands, and I don't think that architecture or product design was going to allow that, and so I ended up in art.
I was pre-med.
Oh yeah?
I was pre-med, and I was pre-med because I thought that's what I needed to be so everybody would be happy with me. But let me tell you about art in my life, because you said you had a stone carving class. When I was growing up, I remember feeling small and insignificant. I was bullied, I was abused. You wouldn't have known it by the surface, because I had I had a cherubesque smile. I played the role of the perfect little child, but I remember being utterly terrified most, if not all, of my childhood. When the first time that I picked up a pencil and I just sketched something abstract, first time I had a wood burning set, first time I made some demarcation in some wood, an erector set, a chemistry set. First time I sat down at a piano and I wrote a song. What was happening for me was that the art gave me a place to displace or discharge this kinetic emotion that was inside of me that had no place to go. And I don't know if I realized it or not, Preston, but I later on I understood that if I didn't have something to do with the energy that that emotion was creating, that it was going to turn on me. Mm-hmm. I needed art. I don't know if that's your story.
In a way, it is. It's.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up privileged. I had a loving family. I was I was the rich kid in a factory workers town.
Wow.
And
this is in Fort Bragg?
No, I grew up in Thomasville,
Thomasville,
North Carolina. But my dad was a doctor. We had a great home. We traveled. There was nothing lacking. And I was bored to tears with my life. Went to high school in Virginia at a private school. Had opportunity after opportunity there. Got a great education in spite of my best efforts. Went to the School of Design at North Carolina State University for a year before I went to rehab. And then spent
Rehab for what?
Drug and alcohol abuse.
What kind of drugs were you doing?
I wasn't real picky, but cocaine was what took me to the bottom fastest. So that's the one I'm most grateful for.
Why does a privileged kid like you need cocaine?
Just, I don't really know. I think that there was something in me that was always looking to fill a void. And, with all the externals that were perfect in my life, there was always, something missing. And that gave it to me, for brief moments. And then, progressively, I had to use more and more to find those brief moments of escape. So was fortunate enough to have the resources, or for my parents to have the resources to send me to treatment, and spent the next year and a half really focusing on recovery, and that's opened so many doors for me for what's to follow. It's a big component of what I'm doing today, in kind of advocating for people that maybe don't have the same opportunities that I had growing up. I feel a responsibility to maybe provide that safety net for others.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
How do you price a piece of art?
Yeah, it's the hardest part of my job. It truly is. I absolutely hate the money of my job.
Really?
Hate it.
So you follow the art. You follow your heart, you follow the art, you end up doing sculpture. The name of your company is Aespyre. Mm-hmm. Spell it and then tell me why you spell it that way and what it means.
It's spelled Aespyre, and all of the work that we do is from an aesthetic base, and we use fire for transforming metal into beautiful shapes.
What's the metaphor there?
I think that it's no mistake that I'm a metal worker, because metal happens to be the most forgiving medium. Nothing is irreconcilable in metalwork. You can make mistakes and you can find solutions. And so in my experience, change in my life comes during times of difficulty. I have to go into the fire in order to be transformed. So our work kind of uses fire to change the shape of things. So in Aespyre metal, there's also a secondary kind of purpose, and it's a building block for the next chapter of my professional career, which is to start a school of metalwork that teaches some of these lessons through metalwork to at-risk populations. So the school will be built on teaching creative choices.
That is so, well, as we do this show, Anything is Possible, I'm always amazed at all the things that I learned. And I'm having one of those moments right now, leveraging fire to create something beautiful.
Mm-hmm. You know, in metalwork, I can cut something too short and weld it back together and try again. If I misshape something, I can go back into the heat and get it hot again and reshape it. So it allows for those mistakes. And so every job that I enter into, I know that, no pun intended, but anything is possible. We don't always know how we're going to execute a job, but we know that we'll get there because we can fail and we can fail and we can fail, but we can just go back into the heat and reshape, and eventually we're going to get there.
That is so good. And I needed to hear that. Like, this is a blessing to me. So let's talk about your sculptures. When you start a sculpture, do you start with an intention to create something specific? Or do you start a sculpture and go, let the muse take me wherever it's taking me? Or is it a mixture of both?
Sometimes it's a mixture of both. I think the more successful ones and the more challenging ones are the ones where I let go more. When I think I'm in control of the medium, generally speaking, I'm going to learn a quick lesson that I'm not. So much of my work is collaborative. In fact, I think my best work is collaborative, whether it be with a specific client or with the team of artists that I employ at my business. So there are challenges there in kind of, working out ideas together. It's always, in some ways more difficult to collaborate. But I think that when I'm sharing what I know and the language that I know in metalwork with a client that's never touched metal before, since they don't know the rules, we're more likely to arrive at a great discovery.
They're not constrained by those rules.
Right.
They'll go, well, what if we did this? Mm-hmm. And it causes you to stretch.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. When you're working on a sculpture, is there a physical sensation that tells you, go left, go right, go up, go down, press in harder, move back? Is there something moving you?
A lot of times I have no idea why I'm making choices.
Really?
I really don't. And then a year or 10 years later, I'll look back at a piece and it'll make sense to me. So I think that there is something driving me, that causes me to make good choices. It's not me, it's not my ego that's doing it.
Who are the sculptors that inspire you? When you see their work, or when you saw their work, you were like, and that move you emotionally, that make you feel something?
I love the gestural qualities of Giacometti. I love people that can express with minimal lines, but the artist that really moved me to want to become an artist was Philip Glass. I wanted to be able to affect people emotionally as he affected me at a performance that he did at Spoleto in the early 1990s.
What happened there?
It was called Hydrogen Jukebox, and it was a collaborative piece that he did with Allen Ginsberg. He put music to Allen Ginsberg's poetry. And I love to write, and I write poetry as well. And just to be moved by that performance in such a strong way. I was still in school, and that was when I drove back to Knoxville after that weekend in Charleston and dropped the whole pre-med curricula. I was like, no, this is where I want to go with my life. affect people the way that I've been affected by this piece of art.
How do you price a piece of art?
Yeah, it's the hardest part of my job. It truly is. I absolutely hate the money of my job.
Really?
Hate it. I mean, and not to take it for granted, I've been very fortunate to be able to make a living doing what I love. But that's what I lose sleep over. Is
really?
Because, you know, when you put a number on, a lot of times...
You just said, I hate the money part of art.
Yeah.
You didn't say you hated the money, but you hate the money part of it.
Yeah. You know, a lot of times that figure, you know, that number is, you know, you have the artwork, which has a title, and then that number, and that's the only dialogue you have between a potential client and you. And if it's too low, then it's perceived
as not being
as
great.
Cheap. And if it's too high, it's pretentious, you know. But, you know, what is my time and my effort and my angst, you know, worth? How do you put a value on that? And I don't, you know, we have a shop rate for jobs that, you know, we try to meet with each project. But coming up with that number is the most daunting, you know,
What's
part
the
of my
most
job.
that one of your pieces has sold for?
Oh gosh. We did a piece a couple of years ago, and I think it went for $185,000 at Caesar's Palace.
How do you feel about artists and stuff being resold? I understand in the future with the blockchain and all of that stuff that artists may have residual income going forward, but you see a great piece that you've done and then history happens to it and art criticism happens to it, and then it sells for 10x of what that was. How do you feel about all of that?
I'm happy for anybody that's going to be able to increase the value of my work moving forward. If it's you know, I don't really look at my work that way though. You know, when it's paid for, what happens to it afterwards, I hope it's cherished forever and ever by whoever ends up with it. But in terms of it kind of being an investment for someone, I lose interest in that world, because then again it's becoming more about, you know, monetizing, and I'm trying to get away from monetizing every aspect of my life and every moment that I have. And that's why I feel weird about charging for my work. You know, I'd much rather give my work away to people that cherish it than make a lot of money off of it.
That's so counter what everybody says we ought to be about, but it's so beautiful at the same time. So let's talk about this school. So
the Farabow School of Thought, this is the year for it. I've been talking about it.
Why do you call it the School of Thought?
Because it's teaching creative problem solving, basically. And so it's about kind of reshaping how we think about life and objectives and goals and dreams. And so it's, yeah, the School of Thought, and the spelling is different. It goes back to the French spelling of my last name. It's Ferrebeau, which my first wife traced back to French roots and translates to beautiful iron. So somewhere in my history there was an iron worker.
Your name is Beautiful Iron. Mm-hmm. So that's pent up in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I know that happens to people, that they had guilds, they had families. Certainly things can be in your blood, but now you want to start a school to do this. Why?
It's a part of my feeling responsible to provide that same safety net that I had growing up. You know, I grew up privileged, and then I went through a period of time where I felt ashamed of my privilege. And now I'm coming to realize that I can step up as, you know, I mean, I've lived a charmed life. I look back on some of the things that I've been able to achieve, and I wonder, you know, how much of that do I have to pay back? You know, I really, feel like it is my responsibility to my community of folks to give back. And so the school is about that, is about providing an outlet for people. And it's not necessarily as much about teaching metalworking skills, it's about taking materials that were left behind or forgotten or abused and transforming them into beautiful objects. And so if somebody comes to my school and they really embrace metal, then I'll have the ability to direct them towards a certification program. But it's not about making metal artists, it's about teaching people to make creative decisions through metalwork.
Wow.
So.
Preston, I've been so inspired to aspire by our conversation. And I'm glad that you've been on Anything Is Possible today, because I think yours is a story of possibility. But what you do with your art, like if I got nothing else out of the interview today about fire actually being an agent of change and progress, that it could make you better, that whatever this divine thing is around us is sculpting us, taking the broken pieces of our existence and welding them together into something beautiful to inspire other people. That, my friend, is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I love your work. I love the person you are, and I love the way you're leveraging it to make a difference in the world and to create possibility. So thank you for being on Anything Is Possible.
Well, thank you for having me.